welcome to another episode of the Always Be Testing podcast. I'm your host, Ty DeGrange, and I have Erin McMahon with us today. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Ty. Great to connect.
Glad to have you. We've had some great conversations and excited to jump into everything. So, for those of you who don't know, Erin McMahon is the head of marketing at Anchor. Really excited to dive into all things Web3, marketing, software. She's got some great lessons learned, and it's going to be a great conversation. Erin, maybe just kick off, help people understand what is Anchor.
Great. So Anchor is a Web3 infrastructure company. What that means is basically we're the internet connection to all things blockchain and Web3, kind of like the AOL or internet connection of early 2000s. And the core product is connecting developers to major blockchains like Polygon and BNB and things like that. And we are doing distributed infrastructure connection all over the world. We also have other tools and auxiliary products, but that's the basis.
That's awesome. So, pretty big developer ecosystem.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And we are our specific position and advantage is the fastest infrastructure from anywhere in the world, which is pretty important for connecting with Web3 because the decentralization and universal access is really important.
That's awesome. And maybe breaking down in super simple terms for folks that are not as familiar with crypto, blockchain, Web3. Can you give a kind of just a simple understanding for folks out there of what do you mean by Web3?
Yeah, so Web3 is sort of the next stage of the internet. The first being universal connection to information online, and Web2 being, connecting people and networks, and then Web3 is connecting technologies that are decentralized. So putting the power back to the people right now in Web2 and previous companies I worked at like Facebook and Google. They are central big companies that people go and connect and share their information and get a lot of benefits and services. But with Web3, it's really people connecting and sharing with each other and not having the power sources with main, connected companies.
Yeah, it's interesting how much we've seen the walled gardens and technology companies have sizable amount of control. And
Yeah.
so it sounds like, for those out there who are less familiar, it's essentially a way to um, paraphrasing you a little bit here, but perhaps democratize different parts of the tech stack for folks. Is that accurate? And give people access and platforms and ability to launch startups that are less dependent on the walled gardens and platforms. Is that one way of thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously those, bigger platforms have their benefits, but in this case it is, really taking the ownership of data and where you are using your information and things like that and putting that back into the hands of the user, which is a core tenet, I think, to the future growth of the world economies and the internet, certainly.
Absolutely, and maybe help people understand like connecting like the developer community and how your Anchor is basically saying here's the technology and the plumbing for devs to essentially build out the right tools for Web3. Can you maybe give the layman's understanding of that and like why is that developer community so important?
That's right. So they have different options to build and connect with and on top of different ecosystems. So a lot of Web3 developers are building on top of Ethereum or different iterations of Ethereum. So when you think about that, it's sort of like a decentralized operating system. And then there are different ways to build on top of that. So, Polygon is one where, users can build on top of that and they get faster responses and things like that for whatever they want to build, whether it's, in gaming or decentralized exchanges or social networks or things like that. So really just empowering developers to have many different choices about how they build and where they build.
That's awesome. And we talk a little bit like, why should people take notice? Why should people consider Web3, look to Web3? Can you give a little bit of a sense of like maybe size or the need and like where does this fit in for folks? Like why should folks care about Web3 versus existing Web2?
Yeah, so I think a core tenet is really decentralization. So, I mentioned big internet companies and sort of removing that intermediary, but also it extends beyond that. It's really, looking at different banking and economic ecosystems, and even moving beyond the restrictions of borders between countries and things like that. It really enables people to engage and provide goods and services and payments for those services across borders. And I think that's a really important thing. It makes it easier for people to start businesses and have ownership and transparency. Yeah, transparency is another huge benefit, that everything is recorded on a blockchain, which is, Web3 is also blockchain crypto ecosystems. And so people can see the transactions that are made, and it's very clear, no matter what record you look at, what is happening and how it's happening. And then, interoperability, which is uh, the engagement across platforms and integrations. So yeah, those are the main things.
No, that's awesome. And we'll jump back to all the good questions around that because I think it's a topic that I think people have interested in. There's some that are kind of not maybe ready mentally to talk like absorb it all, and I think there's quite a few that have followed it with some interest. And I think you're onto some really interesting, helpful topics here, and I'm excited to dive in more for the audience. But let's rewind the clock back. You've had some really cool experiences in your career, and have worked with some really interesting companies. So I'd love to just dive into your background and hear your perspective on how you got into B2B marketing, how you got into technology. Share us a little bit about how it all got started and how it progressed for you.
Yeah, sure. So I started my career at Google, working for Google AdWords. Now it's just called Google Ads, but basically was the ads that you saw when you searched for a key term, and then different regular search results would come up, but then companies identified that they may want to appear for those terms too, because other they could understand and anticipate the needs of what consumers were searching for, and what they would want. So it started there within Google Ads, and as a result, was helping or not big tech companies, emerging tech companies grow significantly, based on what their offerings were. So that was an introduction to emerging tech in the aughts, and it was both technology companies that we're familiar with today, but also, very technical, B2B based businesses. And so I learned about marketing to different buying profiles, marketing to companies who make decisions with multiple decision makers in the buying process, things like that, which I just fell in love with, because I think explaining technology and the value of it to different audiences is really cool, fun, and exciting. And so that I just everything took off from there. So started working at Google, and then I moved to Twitter as one of the founding members of the B2B marketing team there, and helped establish different narratives for different segments and industries. And then from there, I moved to Facebook, and then moved to the startup world.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, now maybe a a great mix of opportunities and experiences. What kind of lured you into the world of this? Let me talk startup first. Why go back to the startup world?
Yeah, I think so. When I first started working at Google, certainly wasn't a startup. It was growing very rapidly, but it still had somewhat of a startup culture, and I really loved that. But I also worked with a lot of companies that were startups, so I knew that at some point I would want to move in that direction. And it so happened that, when I moved from California to North Carolina, and there weren't as many, big companies in the Raleigh area, it was the opportunity to work for smaller companies. And so that moved me to, working for startups. First, a larger startup in the Raleigh area called Pendo, which they do guides and applications that sit on top of web apps. And then from there, I started working in AI for a professor that founded a company, and she worked at NC State, and that was a really small company, 15 people. And then one of my Google coworkers started a Web3 wallet and asked me to help market it. And he said, when you do this, you're going to take the red pill and want to, work all the way in Web3. And I was like, yeah, yeah, sure, sure. But he was right. And that, brought me to Anchor.
That's amazing. Yeah, I definitely am. I don't think it's not common for even folks we talk to in technology to be aware of how far Web3 is going, kind of where blockchain is going and some of its intentions and what can be done there. And I think uh, without going too far into my perspective, I think there's a lot of value in the principles of what it's creating, and like excited to hear about what you're building there. And I think that my hope is that it continues to evolve and improve and be a. I'm a believer in a lot of the founding principles, and I would like to see it continue to thrive. So it's cool to hear what you are doing, and excited to like bring some of the questions and ideas to our audience and make sense of it all. One thing that's
Yeah. And
interesting. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I completely agree in terms of believing in the founding principles. And, like any wave of the internet, or, um, any wave of innovation, you have a lot of different things being built, and then see what works and what people like. And I think that's the exciting part, is to help people build, help bring different offerings to consumers, and then see what wins out, and what is the best and what emerges. And you kind of alluded to this earlier in the question about why is Web3 important, why is blockchain important, and I think the key is, what is the ultimate benefit for the consumer, and then what will ultimately benefit overall society. So I think people hopefully will ultimately be, benefiting from blockchain and blockchain technology and not even know it, but they will see the benefits from, different ways the banking infrastructure has changed, or, social networks have changed and how they access the internet. And hopefully we'll all be the better for it.
Absolutely. I think there's, look how long it took for the internet when it first came to being to evolve and become consumer facing and adopted, and those users retained and regular and have full-fledged businesses profitable and operating properly out of that. It does take some time, even though we're talking about technology and agile software. It's a really interesting point you make.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
You kind of made an interesting comment earlier around like working in AI, having some exposure to AI, talking about the developer ecosystem. Obviously, there's been lots of talk about, well, we don't need to become a coder anymore, which certainly can be debunked or debated. With developers being such a huge part of Anchor, with developers being such a huge part of Web3, what's your perspective, and we haven't talked a lot about this yet, of AI's impact, and what is it in your view? What are some of the considerations to think about when you're thinking about Anchor, when you're thinking about the developer communities within Web3, um, as AI becomes more available to developers, as Copilot solutions become more available? I'm just curious to hear what are your thoughts on that, and has it kind of had an impact yet, or is it still kind of wait and see period?
I think it's had an impact across the ecosystem. It certainly, from my job as a marketer, had an impact in how we do things, and how we, make decisions and how we do things efficiently. And I think it's the same for the developer community. I think every time a new technology is introduced, there's always, is this going to impact my job, eliminate my job, I think it will change how we do things, and I think it's important for people to stay on top of how it can help. And I think as long as you do that and you can see how it can help improve your innovation, your creativity, things like that, then hopefully it can benefit people. I do think that, for example, I alluded to starting my career at Google. I think what I had done at Google in 2006 is now probably automated completely, if not close to. And that's something that I probably wouldn't want to do anymore. So I think it's important to stay on top of what is changing, learn about it. I certainly am learning about it and testing and seeing what works and what doesn't work in terms of how it helps me in my personal life and business. Personal example, I'm like, my toddler is almost 3, right? And I'm like asking Chat GTP, like, how can this help with, how can, I respond to a kid's tantrum, right? And I'm not going to like use everything on that sheet and, say it verbatim, but I'm, certainly using it to integrate the ideas I'm thinking of and how to adapt. So that's how I think of it. I'm optimistic about it because I think that's just my nature, and how I've seen technology evolve so far. But I certainly do pay attention to the people who are building it and voicing some of the concerns about it too. But for developers, I think it should help. I think there are a lot of things that developers do in coding that they would want to do more efficiently, and things that they could, that would help them like thrive in their job more. And I think AI can help with that.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'd love to hear that. And yeah, it's I think it's shaking up our space. And maybe, going back to some of the experiences you've had, what are some of the learnings that you feel are notable from, early Google, Twitter, Meta, Facebook, that you find yourself applying to Anchor, or maybe that are top of mind learnings for you from your experience there?
I think one is, and this is sort of why I fell in love with marketing, is explaining technology in a way that people understand it, get excited about it, and see how it can improve their lives personally and professionally. And I think part of that is, or a lot of that is education, and education in different ways to people, who are developers, and who need, want faster, more efficient ways to do their job, which is what the company I worked for prior to Anchor, um, Insight Finder, was doing. And I'm still doing consulting work for them. So shout out to Insight Finder. Everybody check it out. They do incident prediction. But so I'm sorry, I lost track for a minute. So learning, teaching people education, why things will be valuable to them. And also coming up with, you know, really being clear on what the brand means, what the pillars are of the brand, and how that can resonate with people, because that will help people remember your brand. I think experimenting is very important in all marketing, but definitely in the tech space, because the way people are using things and how people are being communicated to is changing very quickly. So it's very important to always think about new ways to market to people and to, say things. And with tech marketing, we can, measure that very easily with, looking at what tweets resonate, looking at what search ads resonate, and then scaling that based on what seems to be reaching people in a good way.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like some, you know, hard fought lessons from previous roles that you can kind of apply right to what you're doing at Anchor. Maybe drilling down into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about, how are you considering it B2B? How are you kind of approaching the model for Anchor from a growth perspective, and what are some of the things that you're thinking about as a marketer and a marketing leader for Anchor specifically?
Yeah, so I would say for B2B and connecting to developers and developers at different businesses, it's saying how is this going to help you effectively do your job, build your applications, and ultimately benefit your end user because they're thinking about how their businesses are going to grow. So we want to help them from that perspective. So that includes price offering, performance, in Web3, having established longevity and performance and kind of guarantees. Those are all very important things. So that's what we do from a core perspective in terms of connecting to different blockchains in the ecosystem, but then also building tools around that. So how we can help users work with developers in their businesses or build their applications, troubleshoot, understand uptime, get to the root cause of different issues. And that's both from a tools perspective, but also from a service perspective. Our engineering team is very good at, understanding the root cause of very complex blockchain problems just because we've been around for a long time, starting with core connections, and now have moved into the roll up ecosystem space, which is much more modular, distributed, and complex. And our engineering team is basically like, yep, bring it on. So that's been very helpful. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Absolutely. Yeah. And are you finding that you're having to kind of, surround decision makers in almost like an ABM style approach, or is it more, okay, one developer, like I'm curious to like learn a little bit more about how that flow works. Like once they're maybe aware of Anchor, once that maybe they've seen some valuable content, how complex is that decision process for the developer?
It varies. So individual developers, may be looking at price and performance, and then larger developers are looking at how quickly can you scale. So one example is Chili's is a blockchain app that's connected to sporting application and NFTs and things like that, and they, want to go big around certain events and certain teams, and so they need the capacity to handle large traffic inputs in certain times and dates, and so they are very much reliant on what our team can do and how they can support, so they make sure that that launch doesn't fail. But then at the same time, individual developers need to know that our pricing plans work for them, and we are effective in different areas globally. So that's really important to them too.
That's awesome.
Definitely different decision makers. We target for different channels. So everybody is on Twitter. That is essential for Web3, and Twitter, aka X. And then LinkedIn, I think we're finding is very important, especially looking at newer users or bigger companies that are interested in the ecosystem and really want to learn. And then from an education perspective, we look at SEO. So after people are listening to a podcast or they're on Twitter and see something, then they're like, okay, what does AI and blockchain mean? And, why is that important to me? Or is it important to me? And then hopefully we are, creating content that they can look up and help educate them, and then, connect us, within that conversation.
That's awesome, Erin. Appreciate that. Let's go a little deeper on experiments and testing. And you talked about how important it was. Obviously, it's a big ethos of the pod. What are some maybe notable learnings that you've uh, witnessed with Anchor, or maybe you don't have to necessarily name the exact situation or data, but just would love to hear a little bit more about some experiments, testing, and learning that you found notable that you want to share that have been pretty important from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's been a lot of experiments in terms of how we communicate when we communicate certain things. So in Web3, everybody like the conversation changes hourly, literally. And so, if we are planning on launching something next week, we, may change what we're saying and how we're saying it based on, conversations that are happening on Reddit or conversations that are happening on our Discord channel. So we may look at both what our community is saying and, think about the messaging and really get feedback from the community and then, scale the messaging accordingly. We, are a very, very trusted company, but at the same time, we want people to remember and feel like they can engage with us. So that means we experiment with different tones and things like that. So what we do from a social testing perspective is we have a certain percentage of our tweets that are a predictable tone and voice, and then we will experiment with others and see what kind of engagement they get, how many of those users end up on our website and ultimately end up as our consumer, or, our customers. And, we'll look at that very closely. We experiment with data-driven storytelling. What type of statistics are people interested in, from, trending blockchains to percent usage across the world, and we'll see what sort of engagement works for that. And then looking at our SEO strategy and our blog strategy, we'll look at different topics and see which ones drive traffic and interest for different topics, and then can build things based on that, or message based on that. And then also for our core products, which topics of discussion ultimately lead to users and then paid users.
That's awesome. It's nice to hear that funnel and how you're thinking about it. And you kind of touched on this briefly, but like, are you getting signal? Love to hear your perspective on the signal back from what you're seeing for Web3 and blockchain adoption. I mean, my yeah, I don't I'd be curious to hear your view, being closer to it, to know like, are you seeing the signals that you would want to see based on where you want the industry to be going from a developer adoption, blockchain adoption perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's a lot of interest. Bigger companies are certainly, want to make very informed decisions, which is where, long cycle B2B marketing thrives, in terms of making people feel like they're making the right decisions in terms of implementing different campaigns and ways to engage with consumers, as well as, integrating blockchain in the, core business streams and or, revenue streams that they're looking at. And I, truly believe in it, as does my organization. And so it's great to have those conversations to get people excited about it. And that's really why I hopped into Web3 full time, because I do feel like it can benefit all organizations in terms of, engaging with people, and, helping build different sources of revenue, different ways to engage with consumers, et cetera.
That's great. That's great. Um, and then for in terms of like some of the outcomes that you've seen firsthand with Anchor, what are some things that you've witnessed that you're proud of as an organization in terms of value you've provided to the developer community, or for the brands that are integrating with Anchor?
Yep. So I think a few different things, really. First of all, our core product, we offer a free service as well as a paid service. So that allows any developer to really start connecting and building without any cost to them. And then once their app or business grows and they test it, then they can move onto our paid service. And so that really, provides the ability for developers to connect with many different blockchains in the ecosystem, and also figure out and test which ideas work for them. And then as we've been able to move the business forward, looking at some more complex blockchain problems that are being built and or innovations, I should say, well, problems and or innovations, and where we can solve those problems for people, and then once we solve it for different business partners, then we say, okay, how can we scale this and how can we build it up, and we have some announcements that had been made related to building a blockchain for AI called Nura. And then also some more announcements that are coming up in the future.
Ooh, more announcements in the future. I love the sound of that. Definitely keep us posted.
Yeah.
Erin, let's take a little pivot just from your career perspective and your personal growth and professional growth. What was a big inspiration for you in your career? Is there a mentor or a hero that, someone that was helpful for you in your career as you've navigated things?
Definitely, run across people everywhere in the tech ecosystem that are really great and inspiring. The people I worked with initially, Google, some of my peers have started their own companies in different industries. Sheryl Sandberg, who was the COO for Facebook for a long time, was the director of ads when I got there, so she certainly helped influenced my early days, as well as the director of sales, David Fisher, who was also at Facebook afterwards. So both of those leaders were very influential in terms of how to think, how to innovate, how to take risks, how to communicate to your employees and inspire them. And then from a personal perspective, I have always been a huge Duke basketball fan. I went to Duke, and I love Coach K and his leadership principles about, leading and communicating with a team. And so I always get inspiration from him too.
That's amazing. Well, plenty to draw inspiration from there, which is huge. And then similarly, what is there a book or article or resource that you recommend or to folks, or one that's inspired you?
Yeah, so from both a business perspective or marketing perspective and personal perspective, I love Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and that talks about your how you make decisions from your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, and I just go down the rabbit hole with that completely, and I discovered that book through initially reading Predictably Rational by Dan Ariely, which talks about, takes the foundation theory that economics principle that people make rational decisions, and, says, no, they don't, but you can predict how they behave based on how they're thinking. And part of that is, the conscious and subconscious mind. But predictably rational, I would say, is sort of the inroad to that, and a bit more down the rabbit hole is Thinking Fast and Slow.
I love it. We love a good reading list. We have our own reading list. We keep adding to it, and it's always exciting to hear everyone comes with some great answers on those. So certainly
Yeah,
appreciate your insights on that.
of course.
What about item that you've bought that you're obsessed with?
Um, so this, well, so I would say hmm, item recently that I'm obsessed with. I think it would have to be magnet tiles that I recently bought for my kids, because it's been the hours and hours of just building, and they love it. My kids are 3 and 1, so they both engage in it based on their different learning levels, and it's I found that my husband too is really loves building his different buildings. So yeah,
I love it. It's hilarious. We're in a similar stage as I think we spoke about. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old
yeah,
also. So I think I need to go out and get these as soon as possible, because anytime you can give them something that's learning, constructive, positive, it gets them occupied, like such a
yes,
win. So
for
that's a,
longer than 3 minutes. So that's always good too.
I love that. I'm definitely going to get those. Thank you. And
Yeah.
then is there something maybe fun or off the cuff, or that you want to share with the audience that maybe people don't know about you?
I would say recently I've just been downloading so many Audible books of different, crazy topics, and that's my latest thing. That I probably spent way too much on Audible recently. So just love all the books on a variety of topics, both business, spirituality, etc. So I love that.
That's cool. That's awesome. It's amazing what's available, and like I am totally guilty of that too. Got my stack of books, got my Audible list going, which I don't get through fast enough. So I couldn't agree more. I'm a junkie for good information and learning and expanding that stuff. So that's awesome that you are as well.
Yeah,
Very cool.
absolutely.
Very cool. Um, Erin, you've dropped some awesome learnings, some experiences. It's been awesome to chat with you again. I'm so glad to, introduce you to the community and have folks be able to reach out to you and ask questions and learn more about your experience and obviously follow along with all the cool things you're trying to build out with Anchor in marketing. Um, Anything else you want to share and certainly, share folks with, where can folks find you and learn more?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk. It's been a great conversation. So I can be found at Erin L. McMahon at LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. You'll find my LinkedIn is the most, business related. Instagram's lots of kid stuff, and then Twitter somewhere in between. And I'm starting a podcast that's more from a personal perspective called Seek the Magic, and it's about intuition and spirituality, and also get into marketing and team building and things like that. So definitely would love to continue the conversation.
I love that. That's an awesome idea. It's called Seek the Magic.
Yep, yep. I can share
That's
that. I
great.
can share the link. So if that's
Please
helpful.
do. Please do. Well, congrats on launching that. Congrats on all the success you've had. Congrats on the growing family, and just
Thank you.
absolutely
Thank
enjoyed
you.
chatting with you again, Erin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to catch up on child management techniques. I'm excited to hear about the magnetiles.
Yep, I'll let you know how it goes. Thank you so much. Have a
Definitely.
great day.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.